Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Valerie Lalonde. Valerie is a musician turned actor. She did 2 years at McGill for music, like kind of classically trained musician, flute player, and then switched to theater at the University of Ottawa. And we have a fascinating discussion about this kind of interesting university path that she went into. And she goes into this a little bit more in detail, but what's really interesting is when she did formal education in music, it made her not want to pursue a career in music. But when she did formal education in theater, it made her desperately want to do more acting, theater, film, and television. So what is it about formal education that made that kind of weird switcheroo? We have a great conversation about it. Y'all know how I feel about, I love school. Everyone knows that. I love school. Anyways, we have a fantastic discussion about that. She has incredible words of wisdom and advice for how to keep the passion in this career alive when you're dealing with, one-liners and silent on camera auditions. I am so excited for you to hear her story. Please enjoy Valerie Lalonde. Story. How did you get into this crazy business?
Oh man, kind of funny. I sort of stumbled into it thanks to my mom. So I've always loved theater. I did theater as a kid in school, but it was never something that I pursued any further than that. I was like, yeah, it's a fun little hobby. But then as I got older, I started really getting into film, and more specifically, I would watch a lot of the behind the scenes of when you had the DVDs and on the special options menu. So I would watch that over and over again and be oh my God, this is so cool. It looks like so much fun. And when I was in high school, my mom found an ad in a newspaper for a modeling agency. That was a whole nother kind of journey. It didn't go anywhere. But at the time, my mom was like, you should go and do this. And high school me, teenage me was like, absolutely not. I do not want to put myself out there. I'm so shy and I'm not, confident at all. But anyway, so my mom kind of pushed me into it. And through that avenue, I actually found my first acting coach. Who started coaching me in commercial auditions and doing some film and TV sides. And that was really kind of what captivated my attention. And I was like, oh no, this is what I want to do. And I want to start actually taking classes and seeing where this can go, because again, my movie brain was oh, behind the scenes on set, me, could I possibly do this? And so from there, I started just coaching with this acting teacher, and she got me signed with my first agent. This is when I was based in Ottawa. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. And I've been kind of doing it ever since. And now I'm here.
It's so funny because it's almost like the opposite of the vast majority of people I talk to, right? Whose parents, loved ones, guardians very, kindly say adorable, you're great at acting, but that's not a real job. But yours was the flip opposite. It was your mom saying, hey, you should do this. And you being like, well.
Yeah, no, totally. And I always think about that because I'm very grateful that my parents have always supported me. And I've always been a very artistic child. I used to study music, and my parents always kind of supported my hobbies and side interests. And they always, funded lessons if I wanted to, or so I'm really grateful that I have parents who actually supported me and were never I don't think you should do this. It was the opposite. So, and especially with how difficult this career is, it's just one less thing on my plate that makes it just a little bit easier,
Yeah. So, did you ever go to theater school, like formal theater or film training?
So I did. I initially started off my university days. I was studying music at McGill because I always had kind of a double path that I followed. So in high school, I would do film and TV stuff outside of school, but I never really talked about it with any of my like friends or other peers at school because I was like, I don't know if I was embarrassed, but I was just like, oh no, they can't know about this. Like I have to keep it like low key. But in school, I was part of like the music ensemble. I was like coaching other younger kids who were starting music. I was a flute player. And so that was like in school, that was my main focus. And so I always had acting and music. And then when I started my university days, I initially was like, I'm going to be a musician. And I auditioned for four different universities, the music programs, and I got into all four. And I decided to go to McGill, that has a really great music program there. So I moved to Montreal. I went to McGill for 2 years and studied music. And it was great experience, but it was very intense. So moving from playing music because I was so passionate and it was something that I loved to it being like almost like just a drill exercise in like discipline, and like I had a really heavy course load. So I had about 7 classes per semester, on top of like living on my own for the first time out of high school. And, so it was a big change. And after that, I got to a point where I was like, I don't think me being a professional musician is really my career path. So I decided to drop out of that program. I transferred back home to Ottawa and applied to the theater program at the University of Ottawa there, and finished my degree in theater. I have a minor in music, so I was able to tack on my courses that I did for the first 2 years at McGill there. So that wasn't all kind of for nothing, but yes, I did finish my university degree in theater at the theater program in Ottawa.
It's interesting when I talk to people who have been to formal theater training or film school training. And even people who haven't, but whenever I bring it up, there's always this interesting thought of, and you articulated it so well about when you take something creative that was a passion and then formalize the education of it. I don't know, like you're saying, it turns it into a drill, it turns it into, I don't know, it's almost like when people say they monetize their hobbies and it becomes not fun anymore,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
when it's a creative thing, I find it so difficult to formally educate someone about it when it's such a subjective thing. I know music is very academic, very
Mhm.
scientific. There is a method to it, but how did you, once you finished your education, keep that creative passion for both of these things alive?
Well, that's a great question. I think what's really interesting is that I've thought about this often because I always try to figure out why my kind of education in music deterred me from pursuing a career in music, but
Mm,
my education in theater did not.
mm,
Um, and I've always tried to figure out, I was like, what's the disconnect there? I think that for one, like I think what you said about the fact that music is like there's a science to it, which is very accurate. Like there is music theory and musicianship and you know, practicing the notes on a page. It's like written out for you and you play it the way it's written in a very specific manner. And when you're practicing that over and over and over and trying to perfect it. And there's no room for mistakes, really.
mm, mm,
And I think that maybe acting is different in that way because there is room for error,
mm.
because we're playing human beings and humans are not perfect. That's part of the work is to be imperfect. And so even in the practice of it, you have to leave room for mistakes and errors and a slip up and, you know, whatever that looks like. Um, and I think that because of that, it never really felt so rudimentary like music did, um, and left a lot more room for my creative kind of um, like inspiration or my creative interpretation of the work. Um, I think maybe that's the part that really keeps me feeling fulfilled or keeps me going. It's really when I start to think about like the business side of acting that I'm like, oh God, no. um, which is maybe the more like rudimentary part that like you have to like really know like how to get ahead and how to, and that I'm like, I'm so bad at that. And I don't like to think about that because I just love being an artist. Yeah.
Do you find there is anything that you've brought from that kind of more logical, no mistakes brain of a musician, of a classically trained musician, now into your more artistic acting career? Have you found anything has benefited you from that learning, from that time in your life?
I think there definitely is. I think one of the main things is probably discipline.
Mm.
Um, and the perseverance that it takes to just keep pushing through. Um, because obviously, like, if you're practicing a piece and you're really not getting it and you have to practice for, 2 to 3 hours a day, just repeating a certain passage and it, like, really drilling it, like, sometimes motivation isn't enough. Like, you have to have discipline to just do it because it's good for you or good for whatever. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that I've carried on in my acting career is to just have discipline to persevere and push through. Because as you know, you get a lot of no's in this industry, and it's hard to keep going sometimes. And sometimes the just the pure artistic motivation isn't enough. Sometimes it goes away, and it's like you just have to find the will to just keep going despite all of that. Um, I think also something else that I thought was kind of funny is something that might have helped is the fact that like from the get-go, both my career options were like never going to be easy. Like I don't know why I just was like I'm going to pick the hardest things that are not secure in any way, and cuz musicians, like there was no security in that at all. Like as a flute player, if I wanted to play in an orchestra, like there are usually only 2 or 3 flute players in an orchestra, and to audition for that I would have to wait if like until maybe a flute player retires or like moves to a different orchestra somewhere else, which rarely happens because when you get a spot you want to stay there for probably the rest of your career. And then if there is a spot, you're auditioning against thousands of other flute players for that one spot. So it has that same kind of lack of any sort of security. There's no real like path that you can follow that will guarantee you a job.
Mm.
So maybe that's also helped me just keep going in the fact that like I've never had a career option that was going to be secure
Yeah.
ever.
So you graduate from theater school in Ottawa. What brings you to Toronto?
Well, obviously the film and TV scene here is much more, fleshed out than in Ottawa. In Ottawa there's probably I think now only one main casting director who still casts there, and she does a lot of the MOWs and the Hallmark movies, and recently there's been a
We love
couple.
her. We
Yes,
love
we
her.
love
I
her.
had her on my
Yeah,
podcast.
I
Alona
know.
Smythe's the best.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. And she still brings me in all the time. So thank you so much for the the support. But apart from that, there isn't a lot going on there. And I knew that if I wanted to really pursue a career where I could support myself financially, I'd have to move to one of the big hubs of Canada, which is Toronto or Vancouver. And Vancouver was a little far. So I picked Toronto. But also I've always wanted to live in Toronto. I have been coming to Toronto since I started my career in high school, and when I would film on projects, I would travel to Toronto for like a couple weeks at a time with my parents and stay in hotels, and they would drive me to set, and every time I would come to Toronto, it was like oh man, like this is it. Like this is where I need to be. And like I would always be sad leaving the city. And so it was always a dream of mine to like one day I'll live in Toronto and actually be doing this like full time, hopefully. So it is kind of crazy to me that now I live here. It's like a little dream fulfilled from little me who had always dreamed of living here. So yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. I so how do you know, and I know you mentioned how the logical, pragmatic part of theater school is, yeah, here's the business side of things. Like, is that actually true? Did you feel comfortable being like, I hate to use the word, like thrust into the world, but like into Toronto with a theater degree, being like, okay, build your career. How do you do that?
Um, Ironically enough, I find that theater school specific, well, maybe the one that I went to, but I didn't feel as prepared as I felt I should have been in terms of pursuing this as a career. I think that it was a bit of a shock to me finding out the truth of like how to really get ahead or how the business side of this works and the things that you need to do in terms of things like branding and your online social media presence and like building relationships with casting directors, which is so different now that everything is online. And how do you do that now? And the whole like it's kind of like a step by step kind of graduation process up to the roles that you want to get, like the series regulars and the lead roles. Like there are kind of steps that you need to hit to get up there. I'm not saying that like nobody can ever book a lead role if you haven't hit those milestones. That can still definitely happen. But in general, for the majority of people, you're following kind of a bit of a graduation process to get there, which I always found very surprising. I was not aware of that at all. So that was kind of a shock to get used to, kind of thinking about that and being able to pick up on the things that I can do in my control as an actor to help my career. And I think one of the main things that I've always believed is that this industry is so gate kept. There's a
Mm,
lot of like it's hush hush. We don't really talk about what we do, and that's why there's so much misinterpretation of what we do as actors. That like, oh my God, you're an actor. That's so glamorous, and there is an element to that, sure, but that's not the reality of someone who's trying to build a career in this business. It's very hard on the mental. It's a
mm,
mental game, and people don't realize how much like emotional turmoil we're putting ourselves through. And despite that, having to just remain open and not
mm,
close ourselves off. And it's like, it's such a weird thing that we do. And because people don't talk about it, there's such an element of like secrecy. And so new people who are coming into this industry aren't aware, and nothing to
mm,
their own fault. I think it's propelled by people who are already in the industry, and
mm,
like that. I don't know if it's like I don't want to give away my secrets because it's so hard to get here in the first place,
mhm,
but yeah, no, there it was definitely a shock and difficult to kind of adjust my expectations once I
mm.
started really pursuing this as a career.
Did you find, and this is a sentiment I've heard from other people who've been to theater school, very similar to what you were saying, a shock when they got out into the real world. And a lot of it had to do with what the material was that you were being asked to audition for. You're in theater school doing the greats, right? Like
Yeah.
Chekhov and Shakespeare, and I can do anything. And it's like they cast whoever in whatever role. And then you get out into the real world, you're like, I'm an incredible actor. And you are. We all are. But it's like, no, all you are going out for is a silent on camera, all ethnicities, all genders Taco Bell commercial where we just need to see you like lick your fingers. And you're up against 500 other people. And you're like, this is what I studied the greats for?
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated when that's such the reality of where we are here, especially in Canada?
Yeah. That's definitely It's a struggle. I'm not gonna lie. It's hard. But I think one of the things that has helped me the most is finding artistic fulfillment outside of auditioning.
Mm.
You have to. It is essential to keep your spirits up as an artist because that's what we are. We're artists. And we need to work on things that will inspire us and motivate us and like uplift us and all these things that will stimulate your artistic inspiration, because auditions cannot be your singular source of artistic fulfillment. They just can't. And that's something that I struggled with at the beginning because I was so reliant on auditions to make me feel good. And I was waiting for the auditions to come in, and then I would get one, and it was like, oh, it's one line saying, here's your bill. What? And it was hard. And it was like, what do you mean I'm not getting auditions with these juicy scripts? Um, and so I finally got like to a point where it was like, okay, enough is enough. I need to do something about this because it's not working. Um, and one thing that helps me immensely with this is acting class.
Mm.
Acting class is so vital for me to just feel good about my work as an actor. And not just in the sense of I take acting class because I need to constantly be improving. Yes, of course, we are artists and you need to train your instrument and stay kind of fresh and ready to go. But also, acting class gives me that material where I can really dig in and find those juicy little parts and explore and play in class and leave going, oh my God, yes, this is why I love to do what I do. That's one of the biggest things that, when they say, like when you're auditioning, it's not when you book that you start to be confident. It's when you're confident that you start to book. And and it's only when I started really taking that part of my career in my own hands that I really understood what that meant.
Mm.
Because now auditions are no longer this thing that I'm like, oh my God, yes, please. Oh, I have an audition. I need to book this because I haven't had an audition in like 2 weeks. And it's not that anymore. That is my class. That now
Mm.
comes from the work that I do in class when I get that casting week after week and go, oh, what's my scene this week? Who am I working with? Oh my God, this is so cool. It's like a 6-page, like really intense kind of thing. And then the auditions, oh, fun. Okay, cool. Yeah, I can do that on the side, but my focus is the acting class and how fun that is. So that's something that has helped me immensely, just letting go of all that pressure and kind of like white knuckling my auditions, and just really focusing on fulfilling myself as an artist. Yeah, and I think that's something really important that a lot of actors don't do, but maybe I think it's just from a place of there's lack of knowing. Again,
Mm.
like we don't talk about this stuff, and like I wish every actor could know this and like and just like find that pocket of work where they feel really fulfilled because the auditions are just that's the work. That's what we do as
Mm.
actors. We audition, but that's not the real love and passion. The passion comes from this great work that we do, the kind of scary scenes, and you can find that outside of your auditions.
Hmm. I think what can be really tricky is we get in such a mindset, and I'm like, my immediate brain goes, well, we live in capitalism. So, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's when there isn't a chance of making money at
Mm.
something, it's really hard. Maybe it's just me, but it's really hard to put the same priority on acting class, for example, as opposed to this audition where I have a potential of maybe making some money as an actor. But what I really love what you said is that that making that brain shift seems to really take that desperation out of it, which I'm pretty sure people can sense, if there's any desperation there. So in fact, I bet that's making the ability of your auditions to maybe make some money even like more likely because you've made it less of a priority, which sounds completely counterintuitive for any other job in this world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's the trickiest part of of this kind of thing that we do as a career is it's so counterintuitive, you know? And like when I used to approach my auditions in the sense of like, I need to book this, therefore the choices that I'm making, I'm looking for what are the choices that they want me to make? What are the choices that they're looking for this character? But that's where we fall into that trap of everybody will be thinking the same thing. And our work as an actor, as artists, is not to give somebody exactly what they're looking for. We are the interpreter. So we have to come with our own opinion, our own life experience, and make choices based on what we think the character would do based on whatever information we've been giving and filling in the holes with our own lived life experience. And that's where the magic happens. And that's where they'll watch your audition and go, oh, wow, that's such a different choice. Or like, oh, I'm seeing something different. Like there's just a little shift of like an energy that's coming through or whatever it is that's really going to set you apart. And that's where people like, I know it because I lived there and I did that for so many years of trying to find the correct choice. And, you know, when they say like make bold choices, and I'd be like, what's the bold choice? Like I'm trying to find what the bold choice is, but there's no set choice that is the bold choice. The bold move is putting your own interpretation on it. That is the bold move.
Do you have any advice then for anyone, especially actors looking at getting into this later on in life who've had life experience? Do you have any advice for them on how to find that in themselves, or like as broadly as start this career, like find it in themselves to start?
Yeah, I think you touched on it really well in saying find it in themselves. I think that's the most important part is if you're going to come into this industry and decide to pursue this as a career, trust that you are enough. You bring your own uniqueness to the table, and that is vital. Every artist has to bring themselves to the work. And so I think that would be my biggest piece of advice, and something that I see a lot in like acting classes, and like sometimes I assist in teaching certain classes with people who are newer to the business, and I see a lot of, you know, older people who have had a full life and they come in and go, well, I'm not quite sure, you know, what choice to make here. Like, are they upset about it, or are they still trying to like, you know, just confused about what choice to make in the scene? And I always go back to, well, what's your opinion? If you were in this situation, how would you feel? And it's often not black or white, because based on your relationship history with the character, is it a sibling? Is it a longtime friend? Is it a coworker? That's going to affect your opinion of them and how you react in the moment. With family, we're often more kind of liberal and we'll kind of blow our top off a little quicker, versus if it's a coworker, we're going to try to stay a little bit more put together and be more, you know, politically correct or whatever. But I always say, you have to bring yourself. You, like, especially people who are older, you bring such a full life experience to the work that I don't yet have. You know, like somebody who's in her late 20s, I haven't lived, you know, as much as somebody who's in their 50s, who's been married, who has kids, who has traveled places I've never traveled to. Like, all that stuff informs your interpretation of any story. And so trust in yourself that you have a huge arsenal at your disposal to use in the work. And don't worry about whatever somebody else wants, what choices they want you to make. Trust that you are full of choices that will make it so unique to you and will make you stand out as a result.
Oh, that's so powerful. And it's so powerful, but it also is, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, it's very simple, you know, and I think this is where kind of what we were talking about at the very beginning, where everyone goes, oh, you're an actor, aren't you just reading lines on a page, oh, so blah 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 blah, where you're like, Well, it is so simple in the fact that we are just being humans. But damn, does that ever sound so hard to do naturally, which is why
Yeah.
there's so many wannabe actors and not that many greats.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
so easy.
I know.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it seems simple, but it's a lot more complicated. It's hard to be emotionally vulnerable in the way that the work requires you to be. Like, and I see it even in the misinterpretation of people who will ask me, and it's such a like shallow question because like dating as an actor sometimes is a little difficult when you're dating non-actors. And, a question that I get a lot is like, oh, well, if you have to kiss somebody in a scene, like, do you really kiss them? It's like, of course I do. Like, it's almost like they'll watch and people are aware, they've seen movies, they've seen TV shows, and they've seen what actors do on that show. But when they meet like a real person in real life, it's like, oh, but do you actually do those things? Of course we do. That's where it gets tough. That's where, the lines are blurry in terms of your own like moral stance and your values, and it's like it's hard to sometimes separate, like, okay, I am now acting in a scene, I am pretending to be in love with this person, which entails touch, kiss, the emotional connection and closeness that you have to feel with that said person. You have to make it believable. It's not just pretend. Sometimes you got to really push it, and it's uncomfortable. There's a lot of stuff in this work that is uncomfortable, and you've got to learn how to drop that, that kind of wall, the ego that wants to come and protect you and go, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't know this person. Nope, sorry, out the door. You gotta do it 100%. You gotta pretend and make everybody in the room believe that you truly are in love with said person who you just met. So that's where like it's easy to think about the easy acting of like, oh yeah, you walk into a coffee shop and ask for a coffee, great, that's a nice little pretend moment. But what happens when you got to pretend those really tough scenes and those tough dynamics and the things that make you uncomfortable? That's when you really
Mhm.
step into the real nitty gritty of this work.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite moments from your time on set, in class, on stage? Any funny stories?
Oh man, I feel like most of my like funny stories come from auditions because like let's all be real, like auditions are the silliest thing ever, and like sometimes I'm like, what am I doing with my life when I'm auditioning? It's just such a weird thing that we do. So a lot of like my funny stories are definitely from auditions, just like some little flubs. And I remember one audition in particular that was very embarrassing. And this was back when I lived in Ottawa, but I was auditioning for a public service announcement, and it was all improv. They didn't give us anything to prep before coming in. So you walk in and they kind of give you a scenario. And I think the scenario was I'm sitting in a car with some friends and jamming along to some music, and then the director's like, okay, so you're listening to your favorite song. What's your favorite song? And I throw out like a song from The Weekend that I really liked at the time. He's like, okay, start singing it, start singing it. And my brain just like went blank. And I, for the love of me, could not remember the lyrics to this song that I had just listened to in the car before walking into my audition. And I just like remembered like two words and just started saying those two words over and over again. And it was like, you just have to do it. And I was mortified. And you get the little, okay, thank you so much at the end. And you're like, oh my God, I just love that. That was terrible. So, a few things like that, definitely in auditions that happen. And, but I think that like on set, I, I don't really have any like funny or like weird things that have happened to me. It's mostly just really cool stuff. Like, the stuff that you see on set is so awesome. Like I've had the chance to be in like a huge party scene for like a new show that was on Amazon, and like seeing that, like being on set and witnessing like the crew working on that and like all the set decorations and the details of like what they included in that scene was like incredible. Um and stuff like that like really humbles you, especially when it comes to, walking onto a set. And like at first we all are like, okay, this is my moment, I'm walking onto the set, I gotta perform. But like, you're such a small little part of this project, from all the pre-production and the production aspect and the post-production that'll go into the project. You're just such a small little bit in that. So it's like, take the pressure off and enjoy it for what it is, and take it all in, because we don't get to be on set that often, such is the life of the actor. But when you do, like, just take it in, like it's cool, it's so fun.
Well, it goes back to when you were a kid watching BTS,
Right.
right? You're like,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
Like,
I don't know what's happening, but you all are incredible.
exactly. It's like, take the pressure off. We can be so hard on ourselves, and thinking about, well, oh, well, I didn't book these things and I only booked these projects. You booked a
Mm.
project. You were on set. You worked with other actors. You got paid to act. That in itself is a huge accomplishment, and we need to celebrate ourselves more. None of this like, oh, it's not enough. Yes, it is. It is. It is. I feel so strongly about that.
Do you have anything you are looking forward to coming up?
Man, looking forward to. Honestly, I'm looking forward to some nicer weather.
Oh my
Uh,
God. Yeah.
yeah, winter's hard for me every year. I love the outdoors, so and I hate the cold. I love warmth. So definitely looking forward to that. And looking forward to. I'm going to be traveling this year. I'm going to Europe with my mother for the first time in my life. And so I'm extremely excited for that. I can't wait. I think it'll be, again, another just like thing to add to my life experience bag, and like, so yeah, just looking forward to good little life moments is really mostly what I'm looking forward to.
Do you have any final words of wisdom or advice?
Ooh, final words of wisdom. I just believe in yourself, Like, if you really want to pursue a career in acting, honestly do it. Like, I I just think that everybody should pursue what they're passionate about. I think life is too short to, do something safe, because yes, money's a factor, of course, but I strongly believe in the sense that money always comes to you. You'll always find a
Mm.
way to make money, but doing something that you're passionate about, that like you love to wake up for in the morning, is rare. And I just think, yeah, just do what you're passionate about, jump in with both feet, um, and go for it. Like, I love to see people taking risks and just doing something because they absolutely love it and they can't imagine doing anything else. And I think not enough people do that. And like, one of my favorite um, actors, speakers, whatever, Jim Carrey, he always says the most wonderful things. But there's a specific speech that he gave at a convocation ceremony for a university graduating class. And I watch it every time I feel like kind of down. And there's one thing that he talks about in that speech, where he talks about his father and the fact that his father pursued a safe career in like finance, or something, like, as a banker or whatever. And even in that safe career, he got laid off and he lost everything. And Jim Carrey was speaking on that and saying, like, you can still pursue something safe and fail at it. So why not pursue your dream? Because you can fail at anything. It doesn't matter if it's safe or not. You can still fail at that. So why not just take a risk and possibly fail at something you love?
Thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Val, for being my guest this week. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to chat with me and with my guests. Your enthusiasm for this career path just shines through, and I'm just so thrilled that our mutual friend Carrie connected us. I hope you will all tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!